And we're live. Welcome. Thank you so much for those of you who have joined me, Yasmin Choudhury, the Chief Executive of Love Dash, in the memoirs that I call the Love Dash 10 Plus Files. And tonight, the chapter 3 is kicked off, entitled My Father's Daughter, and subtitle being AMC Alhaj Abdul Muquith Choudhury. So, just to recap, that my memoirs are actually a product from the hashtag Justice for Yasmin campaign. And what is hashtag Justice for Yasmin? So, anyone tuning in right now, I am Yasmin Choudhury. I was born and bred in London. I am identifying as a Muslim, but I grew up in a cult Muslim Orthodox family. I have Bangladeshi heritage, namely, my parents were from the northeast region of Bangladesh, which is next to India. I am registered disabled today. I'm 51. I have a daughter who's 20 years old. And hashtag Justice for Yasmin is my way of unburdening and telling the world of what happened to me. And I am an ordinary woman in extraordinary circumstances who has stumbled across the good, the bad, the mad, the ugly, the sad. And one of my greatest horrors, because I've done the introduction, I did chapter 1 about the Alinagar Choudhurys. I did chapter 2, which was the Hall of Horrors and focusing on the fashion sector and what they've put me through. But tonight, chapter 3 is about my beloved father, Alhaj Abdul Muquith Choudhury. Now, I already introduced my father to many of you in the introduction, and I can't urge you enough, but please go to YouTube, put in the search box Yasmin Choudhury, and you will be able to find out a playlist called the Love Dash 10 Plus Files, and it's the videos one by one sequentially of my memoirs, which I do stream of consciousness. So again, caveat, if there are any inaccuracies or anything, it's not intentional. Secondly, I have to do it from the top of my head because I have been left disabled and my disability is post-traumatic stress disorder complex. What that means is over my lifetime as a child, as an adult, often simultaneously and repeatedly at the same time, I've suffered intense and deep trauma at the hands of others, often more than one episode and happening at the same time. Okay, so I'm not going to go into it, but trigger warning: anyone who may get triggered by mention of domestic violence, of sexual assault, of any form of abuse, I please urge you to either leave and allow me the honor of telling my story. And tonight I'm so proud because my father, Alhaj Abdul Muquith Choudhury, who came to the 1950s, late 1950s, having escaped his family, I'm so proud to mention that, like me, and like many millions of men, and I know they exist, he led a tortured existence and he was bullied, and he also suffered domestic violence. But unfortunately, being a brown man, having the burden of having to provide financially, not just for his own children and his wife, but all his extended family, because he was the first one to have made it out from a very, very poor upbringing where he escaped being treated like a servant by his elder brothers to come to London, and he made, like a brown Dick Whittington, his fortune. Soon, money wasn't going to be able to satiate him, because actually he used to cry and say, I thought money would actually solve a lot of things. It's only created more problems. And the only thing that will solve me, he was a deeply religious man, is God, Allah, and serving my life in humanity. And I would urge you, my children, to do the same. So my father, he was born in the late 30s. He actually married quite late. He was very, very ambitious, but also very principled. To this day, I've never met anyone as principled as my father. The reason why I say principled, to the point where as young children, he would sit us down and he would go on and on like he was obsessed. He was like a dog with a bone about truth and integrity. Like, there's some people who might do it through children's stories. No. My father would do two things in his life, or three. One, truth. because to be a liar and to hurt other people is to be scum. And second, it was Islam. In fact, first was probably Islam. And third was the power of education, and using all those three combined to actually fight injustice and stand up for the world's poorest or most vulnerable. So my dad, he was very handsome when he was young, but he was dark-skinned. Now, I don't want to show my pictures of when he was young, because here's the picture that my father would like to be seen as. This is the picture, and I don't know if you can see it on here, but here is my father. And as you can see, there's a whole funny story about how this picture got taken of him in Morocco. Okay, there he is, and there he is with the Choudhury nose, the nose that he always used to stroke of mine as a young child and say, which I thought was cruel, thank God she hasn't got, none of my children have their mother's nose. He was very proud of his nose. Now, my father, why is it that today in 2022, I remain seeking vengeance? Why is it that under the hashtag Justice for Yasmin campaign, not only is it stories about those who cheated and betrayed me and hurt me and my family, being Amber, and my organization, Love Desh, but a lot of it is also about getting the people who did wrong to my father, getting them to put it right, because these people still walk the earth today. Meanwhile, my father is 6 foot under. So for those of you, without further ado, I have got some letters here. And I want to now, before I delve into why my father died heartbroken, why he died crazy, why he actually, I found an entry, trigger warning, I am going to mention suicide. I found a diary before he died saying how he wished he could actually do away with himself. He had no one to talk to. He would write and write. Even as a young child, I would see him scribbling furiously in his near perfect English grammar, but with the odd broken misspelling. And today I'm really proud to have some of his letters here today. But why my father is an anomaly is because I showed you this photograph, right? And he looks like the average Orthodox Muslim. What you don't know is that white posh people were crazy for him. I never got it until he died. I just did not understand his allure, because to him and to me, yeah, we had a very fractious relationship, as many firstborn generations do with their parents, because having come from Bangladesh, they are trying to impose the best of being British, which is education, but also to maintain their religious and cultural identity. And that's when sparks would fly. I was not interested in my culture. I've already spoken at length about how I was dark-skinned, and I will talk about that much later, about, beauty. I've already done a beauty memoir book, which link in my bio or on the Love Dish website you can go and buy. And part of it is understanding rituals of beauty, which actually, funnily enough, came from my father, because my mother was very unhygienic and she didn't teach us anything. And it was my father who was very clean. He never smelled. He actually was really devoted and would often give his children a bath. And I know now that that is unheard of in the 1970s, because we were living above the curry house and suddenly we would hear my father's march. And depending on the impression his feet made and the sound on the stairs would indicate his mood. So if they were angry, stomping feet, often associated with him saying some kind of obscenity, because by no means was he perfect. He was the most flawed, angry, toxic individual. He was one of the first that I was to meet. But the strange thing is, as much as he was like a bull and you show a red flag and he would just snort and flare his nostrils and go crazy, just like that, he would turn into a child of love. And all you would see is his features soften and him look at you with such love. And suddenly I look back now and I can see the child in my father, scared, seeking reassurance, seeking an apology, seeking and asking himself, what have I just done? Because sometimes he could not manage his emotions. And I now want to, before I go, this is what I found interesting. The first time I realised that there was truth to his story, which he never shared with me, he never told me how bad it was growing up. I found this letter, and he's actually written it to my brother-in-law, Enamul Haq Choudhury, who is a shwar, is a pig. I repeat, my brother-in-law, his nephew, who is the son of his older brother, who married my sister, Parveen, who's a British solicitor. Do you know how many letters I found of my father going mad and writing to his son-in-law stroke nephew, who actually infiltrated our family, bamboozled my sister into marrying him while she was very young and vulnerable. Please don't say that just because she was 21. She was very, very, very vulnerable. And I would find letters like this. These are letters that he would write. And right at the top here, I don't know if you can see, but it says these are question Enam should answer. Because what happened is, when nobody would listen to him, he was gaslit. He was made to be crazy. He was told he was stingy and that he was crazy and greedy for money because he was forever lending and helping people financially. And then what would happen is they wouldn't pay him back, or they would betray him, take the money, steal. And as soon as he asked for his money back, they would actually come down on him like a ton of bricks. And the reason he became, I think, really distressed and bullied is because look at the list of people. And I found this in my garage, so unfortunately I think this is mice who have eaten it away. But he was forever recording, and he would cry and he'd say, nobody believes me, nobody wants to hear my story, but I'm going to write it all down. Maybe in my death I'll be vindicated, because I'm not a liar, I'm not a cheat, all I've ever done is help people. So before, I want to show you again the picture of my father, and I will tell you the story about how he ended up in Morocco, because there are crazy, heartwarming stories. And he was the most loving person I've ever met, especially with others. Okay, but listen to this. This is the letter. It's not dated, which is unusual for my father. And there's thousands of these scripts that I found. I managed to rescue and scurry away because I was so scared my family members will burn them, because some of them have records of the people owing him money, right? And I knew he was leaving it behind. And he always told me, if anyone asks you and comes and says that your father took money, call them a liar and ask them to bring witnesses, because as God is my witness, as soon as I die, watch for the wolves to come out. My father died leaving about £2 million estate, both in the UK and Bangladesh. But my father didn't make this estate all by himself. We, the girls, not my brother, contributed to it, okay, financially, and we also worked towards it. Me, especially more so, because at the age of 13, I was working on an industrial sewing machine when my father was fighting court cases, and he would get into partnerships and it would all go wrong, and then they would actually try and cheat him, and then he would find he had to pursue them through the courts. Okay, so that's why I ended up working for my family at the age of 13 after school in the cellar on an industrial sewing machine. But here it is, and I'll come to Enam, and I am more than delighted to say I'm delighted to announce one of the latest products by Lovedesh, which is the Enam Bodna. Now, Bodna is a phrase or word in Sylheti, which is the dialect of the people in the northeastern region of Bangladesh. Bodna means the washing utensil that you use in the toilet to wash your bottom. That's right. I, Yasmin Choudhury, Chief Executive of Lovedesh, am very proud to announce the launch of the Enam Bodna. Since Enam is on the run and ghosts me and refuses to answer questions and refuses to actually face what he's done, not just to me, but to my father before he died and after he died, and why the charity named after my father was destroyed in 2015 by everyone, including my siblings, because they all want to take over my father's assets and estate and want to hide the fact that he left 1/3 of it in Bangladesh at least to charity. Here are the questions that my father never got Enam to answer. And this is the first question, and I would find lots of this, but I managed to get this one. And it says, question number 1 to Enam, his nephew, who is also his son-in-law, married to Parveen, the British solicitor, who is a fraud, a liar, a thief, and a cheat. of the elder brothers hit, kick, something, and even throw and even stop our meals. Also, they did not give me a single penny to come to London, but still I did respect and work for them. They called me thief, dacoit, even though I did not disregard them. Rather, I helped them with my last penny. Does he not? Has he not heard of this? Is this true or false? So as you can see, my father has a style of writing as if he is some kind of clerk in a courtroom, but he's presenting his own case. And I can see now the madness or the trauma, because he's writing, he's crossing out. Don't know if you can see, but look how many times he's crossing out, because often he would be crying and sobbing as he's writing this, because there was nobody to support him. Not one adult came for him. Not one adult. Because what you have to understand is my father was so brilliant, was so exceptional. And like I said, white posh people used to love him. And when my community or our toxic community saw that, number one, it's take down Alhaj Abdul Choudhury, because he's got two above himself. And how dare he have the audacity to try and educate his girls when the rest of us are doing the right thing by getting them married off, as is the right thing to do by taking them to Bangladesh. Who does he think he is? He's got wild dreams. He's got ideas above his station. Second question, my father, in this letter, after the death of their father, he's talking about after the death of Enam, I was the only one to maintain their family until Hazi Sab, his other brother, marriage their mother in August 1970. True or false? So Enam, who is my first cousin, the nephew who was the son of my father's, one of his elder brothers. What you don't know is that his brother Shuna, Gold uncle, died. He was quite philanthropic. And I introduced that scene in the introduction of my memoirs. Now, when Gold uncle died, I think he died in the late 50s or early 60s. His wife, who by then had 3 children, of which one was Enam, and there were girls. There were 2 boys and I think 4 girls. Okay. Rushna, Panna, Zana, and Shamim and Enam. Okay. Now, Enam was the oldest boy, but Zana was the oldest daughter in that family. When their mother became widowed, the entire family got her remarried. Are you ready? It's like Henry VIII. It's crazy. Catherine of Aragon. They got my Shuna Sassi, my Shuna auntie, because women in our culture, it's so disgraceful, take the identity of the man's name because they don't have any identity, although Islam doesn't allow that. Shuna Chachi, my auntie-in-law, okay, was then remarried to one of my father's other brothers, next brother down. They're like, his name was Haji because he was the one who went to Hajj, and ever since then he was called Hazi Uncle because it was so rare in the 60s to go to Hajj. Hazi Uncle was told to marry Enam's mother. And I now look back and I suspect it's to do with keeping the property. And this is where I'm going to start trying to take you on a very complex rabbit hole to explain to you how greed, land, assets, inheritance, patriarchy, male primogeniture. Primogeniture is the act of the eldest inheriting. Male is when it's only male elders inherit. Okay, how all of that has been fused and through centuries have trickled down, and in decades of my life, the stench is so disgusting and filthy that today it is a stranglehold on decent society and is causing young girls to be forced into marriages, to actually be having their assets stolen from them by their Muslim brothers, which is rarely talked about because to talk about it is actually very risky, is to bring on shame and also to expose your family, which is why I am one. I've never come across any woman talking about her inheritance issues publicly in a Muslim family. And the reason why it's so crazy is because Islam says very clearly a woman has a lot of financial rights. But in practice, it's almost as if there is convenient amnesia and there is a distinct refusal by elements in my toxic community, which is the Sylhet family community to refuse to give women inheritance. Hence, what I find interesting is my father, in question 2, after the death of their father, Enam's father, I was his only one to maintain their family. What my father's saying is, I paid, and he was running 2 families, his own and his widowed sister-in-law, okay, until Haji Shab married their mother in August 1970. Now, I was born in May 1970, and it makes sense now that I was taken to Bangladesh. Did you know that? Probably for the wedding as twins, very young. My father again ends that sentence saying, true or false? And I know that true or false, because although it might seem a bit, what does it sound like to me when I see my father? True or false? It sounds quite petulant, doesn't it? But do you know what? What you have to understand is when he's writing, my father was by this time so broken, often crying alone at nights, going crazy, smashing his head against the wall. And we would be pulling him away from the wall. And he'd be crying and he'd be saying, you don't realize just how awful your mother is to me. And I would never believe it. None of us believed it. He had nowhere. He had no respite. He had no one to turn to. Anyone he turned to, they'd end up listening to him and then asking for money. Going back to my father's questions, number 3. Since 1965, he's asking this of my brother-in-law, Enam. Since 1965, I was financing Hazi. So with my last penny till he died, 22nd October 1978. Is that October? For the sake of the whole family, true or false? So what my father is writing is that since 1965, not only did he support his own family, but with every penny until the brother, Haji uncle, who remarried Enam's mother, and when he died in 1978, he was also maintaining my uncle and Enam's family. So he was running 2 families. All right. Question 4. After the death of Haji Shab, that's the word my dad calls his older brother who remarried or married Enam's mother who remarried, okay, into the family. I did force Enam for further studying. All expenses would be paid by me. Enam refused. Also, I went to Bangladesh to bring Enam to London. Zana stopped me. True or false? So what my father's saying is this is a whole cry for help, because what you don't know is when he wrote this letter, Enam had screwed him over and actually dumped my father from a business that my father had set him up in after he'd got married to my sister. All right. And my father was so wild with grief. And what he's saying here is even when Enam, although it wasn't his son, just a nephew who now had a stepfather in the shape of one of my uncles, still my father went all the way to Bangladesh and said, I want to bring him to London and I'll raise him. But apparently he was stopped. He also offered my brother-in-law the chance to study, but he refused. And when it was talk of bringing him to London, his older sister Zana refused and said, no, I don't want my brother going. And what you have to understand is, so that was Enam's life. He hardly did anything studying, and he was very, very spoiled, because forever we grew up hearing about how he was an orphan. But not really, because he had a stepfather and he had uncles who were all pitching in financially, but mostly and only my father. Question 5. Enam and Atik, I don't know who Atik is, I think it might be a cousin, want to do business in Matin Bai's name. That's another uncle. With my money, which I strongly opposed, but for the sake of Enam and the family, gave them money, but trouble occurred. Do I know why? I have not got my money as yet. I was told one side story. Matin Bai, look, final bill, true or false. Now, I don't know if any of you are understanding this so far. But yet again, this is a litany of complaints that my father is writing. And little did he know that in 2022, I'd be sitting and reading out aloud his musings, his thoughts, his grief to a complete random strangers across the world who I've never met, under the hashtag Justice for Yasmin, because hashtag Justice for Yasmin is justice for my father. And the final questions, number 6. Enam and Atik, both of them start business, don't know where they get the money from. They too broke up with serious troubles. Don't I know where they got the money from? Okay, so this is the thing. My father is talking to himself. This is the extent of his trauma. I know he's got no one to talk to, so often I would find his light on at 4 a.m. in the morning after he's read his prayers or whatever. He used to do tajud namaz, and then he'd have a notepad. Notice, it's just, look, it's not posh. Yeah, he'd rip this out. Yeah, and the last question, as part of that, probably his therapy for himself. Question 5. Enam and Atik, both of them, and I can do the impersonation. He'd be like, Enam and Atik, both of them. They start business. Don't I know where they got money from? What he's trying to intimate is they know where they got the money from to start their business. It was from me. They too broke up with serious troubles. So basically, the business combusted. True or false? I then want to move to this letter. There's loads. I'm not going to be going through too many letters. My father, people owing money in Bangladesh. Halal in Chittagong, 3 lakh. Faisal, my cousin. Oh yeah, Faisal, I'm coming for you because Faisal, you helped destroy the charity in my father's name. Hey Faisal, tui amar bafor namor নাম লাগাইয়া আর দাদির নাম লাগাইয়া আমি একটা এনজিও খুলছি তুই একটা ধ্বংস করছস ওটা লাগি তুই জরিমানা দিতে হইবে Faisal borrowed 10,000 taka, deposit to the bank for secure bank loan. Don't know. Faisal's sister's marriage in 1985. Tara took 10,000. Okay, I think. I don't know. Is this pounds? I told him enclose 10 feet of land to our Bangladesh if he or his children buy too little value, then return value. Okay, I'm going to skip. Basically, my father lent money and saying, look, if you can't pay it back in return, can you actually, can I have it back in form of land titles? So a portion of your land. Okay, right? This was now in 1985. I would have been 15. Also, earth feeling must be counted. Matin Bai also said he does not mind to give up his 10 feet of land. Faisal marriage more, £2,100. Sabumia, an uncle of mine, in 1998. Look at that. I don't know if you can see any of this. Okay, my father's, look, scribblings of all the people. So my uncle on my mother's side, who was always, I couldn't stand him, took another 1 lakh. Emad, a cousin of mine, took 1 lakh 33,000. Ohi, Mama, on my mother's side, who used to do the books for us, but is so dodgy and was last seen running and hiding because he belongs to some kind of extreme Islamic sect, okay, who actually knew about my father's will but never told me because he's so busy praying 5 times a day. He took 28,000. Ohi, my uncle on my father's side, a nephew, he took some money. Maulana Ahok, 30,000. Futul Mia, 10,000 rupees. Azad Bank. Azad is another guy. Oh my God, this is probably boring. He's a man, I've got a photograph of him who knows and who's been hiding my brother and actually helped to transfer after my father's death the main property that's worth £1 million out in Bangladesh Sylhet city centre into my brother's name. So Azad took money. Abdul took money. Shaheen, Enam. Look at that. Something he paid Abun Mia. Anyway, I want to keep moving on, right? I then found, are you ready? Right? Letters and letters to my mother. Okay? Oh, by the way, I have a letter from Enam, my brother-in-law, writing to my father to ask him help to get his passport into the UK after he married my sister. Here is him pleading and begging my father and asking him for help. And my father arranged for a letter from the then MP Tom Cox. Look, Tom Cox. Okay, Tom Cox. I don't know if you all can see it. There is a letter coming from the Home Office, dated 17th of February 1993, discussing the entry of Mr. E.H. Choudhury. Thank you for your letters, 18th December, Tom, to the MP, my father's MP, and 15th January, with which you enclose this correspondence from Mr. E.H. Choudhury of 68 Rofant Road, who has been refused settlement following his marriage to a woman settled there because they realised it was a scam. As you know, Mr. Choudhury has appealed against this decision to the appellate authorities, which Parliament established for the purpose of resolving disputed matters of this kind. Mr. Blah Blah, Mr. Choudhury has also asked whether it would be possible to remove the time limit imposed on his stay on 15th May 92, but the immigration rules provide that the time limit may only be removed at the end of the 12-month blah, blah, blah. Mr. Choudhury will shortly receive formal notice of refusal, giving him a further right of appeal. So, yeah, my father was forever traipsing to the MP's office to keep my bamboozled, silly little sister happy, because by then she'd shacked up with her first cousin, right? And I do want to talk about you, Nasmin, because let's remember how much you made our father cry and how you punished him because he chose to love Amber, who was mixed race, and how the day before he flew out to Bangladesh and we would never see him again, you stopped and refused talking to him, and you punished him because he chose to have Amber the night before his flight in Bangladesh. This is the pain I have to suffer. These are so many letters, and I'm desperately looking for anyone who speaks Bengali, okay, right, to actually help me translate my father's letters, because all he would do is write and write and write. He would go crazy. Look at this, right? He's got here, look at that, just writing and writing and writing and writing and writing, okay? And sometimes I would hear him sobbing. Now, let me tell you about the cruelty he suffered, okay? Why is it that I'm very proud to announce, okay, and I have 20 minutes left, on the 23rd of March, I am announcing the campaign called Bully Free Blue, thanks to some of my moderators, in particular Thumb5, who came up with the name. She's not attached to this story or me in any way, but we were just discussing about a campaign to help victims of domestic violence and survivors of abuse and trauma. I'm inviting the whole world to wear blue, Bully Free Blue, and I want it on 23rd of March to celebrate and commiserate not just my father, but every single person who's ever been traumatized, abused, gaslit, and died without being vindicated. And for people to see us walking around in blue so they know that they're not alone. Because I want to now talk about what my father suffered. My father was mocked, he was laughed. My mother's sister, Jilu, and I call this woman Jilu because I have her on tape. She was always jealous of my father. I don't know if she had some kind of secret fixation with him. My father was very successful, very smart. He'd opened up his restaurant. He began to give a helping hand to every single Fucker. Do you know I grew up with never having my father and mother alone in the house? We always had what we would coin the word refugees. So as you can see, I'm sweating, okay? I'm sweating because I need to take deep breaths. My father would give free lodging to anyone who needed it. So if that meant we had to squeeze up in bed as kids, we did so. My father would sit there and we'd complain and be really selfish and saying, why? But I don't want to. Why do people have to stay here? Because, Baba, if you don't help people, how will I answer on the day of judgment? I have the ability to help people. I'm rich. Not everyone gets to be as rich as me, so it's my only way I know, because I feel sick and guilty of being so rich. I know what it's like to be hungry. I know what it's like not to have a father. I know what it's like to come to this country and have no one helping you or being spat on your face because of racists. But what you didn't know is while he was dealing with the racists, and while he might have had a lot of admiration and respect from the white middle class, and I'll talk about Mr. Dealey, the bank manager of Midland Bank, who absolutely adored my father. He was so posh, Mr. Dealey, and my dad would sit there laughing and he'd say, I might not be educated, but Mr. Dealey respects me. Because Mr. Dealey in those days, in the 60s and 70s, can you imagine the bank manager? What you don't understand is in those days, they were so powerful. They were the equivalent of, there were two most powerful people locally, the MP and the doctor and the MP, okay? And your bank manager. Your bank manager was your ticket to the future, to, wealth. And if the bank manager, because often they would lend money based on people's characters, there wasn't really business plan, yeah? They had to just lend money based on people just pitching in a way. And Mr. Dealey adored my father. And the reason I know this is I'm waiting to go through the box of letters, and somewhere I found Mr. Dealey congratulating my father, saying on the birth of your twins, of which I was one. But Mr. Dealey might have loved my father, but I don't think many people did. not even his children. I worry sometimes that I'm not sure if my father knew how much I loved him, because there were things that I didn't do that I should have done. And that's why I'm seeking, under hashtag Justice for Yasmin, vengeance for my father. Because while he was sobbing and crying and trying to tell me that he was being treated really badly, not just by my mother, but by her sister Jilu, who, do you know what's really creepy? I would go to my aunt's house. He would always come with lots of food, and he would spend a fortune because he was so paranoid. He didn't want anyone accusing him of actually outstaying his welcome, or the fact that he didn't pay his way. Even after that, do you know what? I always remember feeling really scared or feeling uncomfortable around this woman. She would always call me over and she'd say, oh, this one is fascinated. She loves her daddy. Tumar bafar lagi ze maya naini ko mai. And I'd sit there. That is in translation. You really love your daddy, don't you? Don't you, dear? And I'd say, yes. But tell me truthfully though. Who do you love more, your mother or your father? Tumi khare beshi maya khoro. Tumar mare nina bafre maya khoro. And do you know what my stock answer would be? Always my father, and it used to really make her mad. She was so toxic. And I'll never forget when we went round to stay one night and we were laughing because we were teenagers and we found some blue videotapes, her and her husband. And this woman wears the hijab today. And of course, whenever we'd go round, she'd give little jabby, snipey comments to my father. And do you know what? It's only now I look back and we would feel the tension in the air. And he would come in gingerly and he would always cry and say later, when these people come round my house, it doesn't even feel like my house, because he had no relatives. All my mother's relatives he brought across. It was only in the 90s that my father's relatives started to come across, okay? Because none of his brothers came across. They all stayed in Bangladesh. But all of and this is what he used to say in Sylheti, Shara habi gushtu damianaisi, about my mother's side. But not one of them has actually had the decency to actually show me any respect. He would put them up, he would care for them, he would get them jobs, he would do their paperwork, he would do their forms, on and 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 on. And you know what? He did it because what I realize now is that my father was terribly in love with my mother, but she never liked him. And I have found letters of my father pleading to my mother. But you know, I'm not going to blame her because, reminder, they both met on their wedding day. He was significantly older. I think she was 14. He was probably, 24, 25? So that is a 10-year age gap, okay? I'm not going to have anyone blame my mother or father because they were both, in a way, vulnerable, adult, vulnerable child. I don't even think my mother knew what SEX was. So in a way, it would have been very frightening. So I'm very, very fair. However, what I remember is that my father, when he used to earn money in the 1970s, I had visions of me in the curry house. And Friday or Saturday nights when he'd sit down, Sundays, that's it, Sundays would be stock taking, the cash. He'd be counting the cash because the restaurant was not that busy then. And then was it Sunday or Monday? He would sit and I see all the money splayed out before him and the grey enamel cash box with all the money from the till, and I'd sometimes help him count it, play around with the pennies. He'd give me some pennies and we'd be sitting at the table where previously the weekends diners had eaten, got merry, drunk beer, curry, called him Michael. The odd brick would have been thrown through the window from racists. He would have gone running out, called the police or whatever, but then always being laughed, jibed, Michael, because his name was Muquith, Abdul, Muquith Choudhury. They couldn't say Muquith. And then he would do the takings and then he would roll up the bundles of £50 notes, okay? Because a lot of people there, if they were in groups, they would pay in £50 notes, okay? Because in the 70s, when people went out, they didn't want to have too many loose notes. So they would have £50 notes. So my father would get the whole money. And you know what? I swear to God on my life, I would watch my father hand it all over to my mother. And I would see how eagerly he raced up the stairs to go and give the money because somehow he was looking for validation and approval. And my mother would give a slight tight smile and then secrete that money away. And she would then just use it for whatever she needed. Because my father was already obviously paying the bills. So he would put money aside for the bills and then he would give all the surplus to her. I remember my father coming and buying perfume from France for her, but all of that was locked away. She had no interest. There was no love. So the cruelty and torture that my father faced is this. He has and was in a loveless marriage. He was trapped. I don't recall anyone ever making my father a lovely meal. I don't ever remember my father ever getting in from a hard day's work and having a beautiful meal just laid out for him, all his favourites. He used to weep and cry, and so slowly he became violent. I won't lie. And the point is, I now look back and wonder at the father who used to bang his head late at, night in the restaurant and crying and screaming. As he stopped banging his head, he started banging his head on the prayer mat and crying to God and saying, why am I tortured? I'm a dog. Ami kuttar zibon. Ami zanoni dukke isi dukke murmu. I came with sadness, I will die with sadness. Oh Allah, make sure I die and that, you know what, nobody has to look after me. Oh Allah, amare maut khoriya dila. Oh Allah, ami zano mori tomar asroy. Under your shelter, oh Lord, let me die. Don't let anyone look after me, Lord. That is the worst punishment. I don't want to rely on anyone. Oh Allah, I have never known pain like this, Allah, because I'm exhausted. I've tried and tried. I help and help, but nobody seems to love me or care for me, not even my children. They're all on their mother's side. They all hate me. So here's a quick stories about my father, which I will continue in other, chapters, all right? There's some of the brilliant things my father's done. My father rescued a woman called Lily from domestic violence, but in doing so, the entire community talked about him and spread false rumors that he had cheated and he was having an affair with her, and he cried his eyes out because he was the only man who got on a train as soon as he heard her screaming, and then he charged over there and he just took her and brought her back to our house and immediately gave her a bedroom. But instead, he was laughed and mocked and derided, saying, nobody does that for a girl. What weirdo would do that? He's doing that because he's got the hots. At his age, he's disgusting his daughters. Tan biallah khorfuri ekhon tain kia jo kun betide tain kia basaida. And that is to be spread by all his enemies and people on my mother's side. And he cried about that. And then, you know what? He told Lily she needs to get out. And you know what? Lily was traumatized. I remember Lily, and I have her number actually, my Lily Khala. And in the end, there was another girl he rescued called Rukhsana. Now, this time she was his niece, whereas Lily was as a cousin, my mother's cousin. But Rukhsana was one of his cousin's daughters. She, again, was in an abusive marriage in the UK. He went and rescued her, and guess what? She lived in our house for about 4 years. But do you want to know what her and her father did? They got her married off, and they didn't even tell my father. And I thought my father's heart would break into smithereens because suddenly they found a British guy who wanted to marry Rukhsana, this woman who my father had got legal, settled. And then the minute the parents found out that she had a British passport, on her first trip aboard back to Bangladesh, I'm not blaming Rukhsana, they got her married off. And then it was a shock to my father because he was hoping that Rukhsana, by staying with us kids, she would teach us Bengali. He also helped to get her a job. So that's Rukhsana Gate. Yeah, we've had Lily Gate. Then there was obviously Enam Gate, and after my Bodna Enam, as I call him, had married my sister, he came wheedling to my father and saying he wanted to go into business with his friends. Guess what Enam did? He actually took my father's money, and within 1 year, he kicked my father out of the business and left my father high and dry. And my father was so humiliated because he'd financed the whole operation. Today, that business continues to go, called Nirmati. Okay? Finally, what else can I tell you about my father? Because, I haven't been able to share some of the funny and wonderful moments, but I tell you this, when my father smiled, and it was very rare, I felt as if 50,000 angels had come into the room and everyone would be swept with his charm and the kindness. And then after he died, and I'm going to leave you with this, okay? I think I've read it to many of you before. I did this article, and I want this to go down to understand because it was very hard for me, but I wrote it back in 2016 about the experience of my father's death, how death turned my hand, eyes, and heart towards the third world, and why today I am the only surviving relative, blood of his, who remembers him, who's fighting vengeance in his name, who's trying to rescue his assets from the clutches of culprits and thieves in my family, including my sister, my brother, my mother, my siblings, my cousins, Faisal, Fahim, so many, and how I'm on the march to try and regain control, not only of the restaurant called Nasmin's, named after my elder sister, because it opened in 1966, the year of her birth, and it's in Earlsfield, and my brother has stolen it, and it's in his name, even though my father told him that after his death, he needs to split it with all of us, and that he was keeping it in his care. I am hoping that Nasmin's becomes Shay Lovedesh, but at the moment, my brother has control of it because I've noticed his wife, Rima Rofe, has started chit-chat pans, and I believe that their goal is to actually give it straight to my sister-in-law, who is a gold digger and actually has not got any claim or right, but unfortunately, the title deeds are in my brother's name, and it's been 2004 since my father died, but none of us have seen him, even though he's lied and said to people, I've transferred it over, I'm going to give it to my sisters. If you go to Land Registry now and you look up 398 Garrett Lane, you will find that this property worth, we believe, is million, could be less because of COVID now. It's a 3-bedroom freehold flat, a freehold business. It's where I grew up in. It's the family home. Yeah? It's registered in my brother's name, so that when he dies, his wife will automatically get it. And if you go to Instagram, you'll find that I stitched her to a video where I ask her and I warn her and I say, please don't make me go public about you. And she's not responded. There is a video on Instagram addressing and showing evidence of the culpability. But next, the LSE article, How Death Turned My Hand, Eyes and Heart Towards the Third World. The loss of a father for many will often spark not just fury, anger and loss, but invite a calling. And that is what happened to me. Not immediately, but slowly, drip by drip. Made all the more shocking and frightening as this calling meant I chose to embark on a journey of examining international development at grassroots. All on a shoestring budget, alone, with no previous professional or academic experience. The how, where, and who of it all I hope to share with you, not just in my memoirs, but also in this series of exclusive blog posts for LSE Sociology. In 2004, when news came of my father having been hit by a truck on his way to morning prayers in Bangladesh, I recall feeling dazed and robot-like. Yet after news of this abrupt accident, I flew out. Within 24 hours, I landed in Osmani Airport, 15 minutes drive from my family home in Sylhet City. However, I soon realized I'd been lied to by my family members. Weeping, wailing, screaming women engulfed me. Men wore white. Women were beating their chests. The father they told me I could expect to visit in hospital, for whom I was clutching my Muslim rosary beads and fervently praying for, was in fact lying in front of me, dead. Inside an open wooden coffin, eyes closed on his cold, calm face, within a white linen shroud frosted with melting ice on a hot day. Gone from me forever, swallowed. I guess they thought I was too delicate as a woman to bear the shock of death. My anger and grief turned inside out to annihilate my entire positive thought processes for Islam and Bangladesh. I flew back to UK within 24 hours and pondered. I then chose to cut ties with his beloved country, Bangladesh, which I angrily accused of stealing and deleting him from my life. You see, my father was my rock, the best man I ever met. I never wanted anything to do with Bangladesh again. Remember, everyone, this is 2004. Now that he was gone, I started to reflect on my father's pleading calls to me throughout my city career to help him fly the banner of true Islam and to set up a charity, all of which fell deaf on my westernized ears. You see, I was busy having my life and my career. I had no desire to ever connect or have anything to do with Bangladesh. Attracted by the big city lights of London and fast corporate life, by the time I hit my late 20s, I'd run away from all that he had taught me, including him. After a few years had passed, I'd found myself mellowing, so I flew out again to Bangladesh in 2008, and through the search to find my beloved father, rediscovered his story, his legacy, the weeping rural villagers who to this day cry over his loss and cling to me. Yasmin, you are ours. We walk with you. Don't leave us the way your father did. Oh, Gomai. তুমি আমরার রক্তরে গো আমরা তোমার লগে আছি মনে আমরা রে সারিয়া যাইস না জেলান্থর শোনা পাফে আমরা রে সারিয়া গেছই. How could I not listen? You see, grief is a funny thing. It makes you do random acts. It stays with you like an intimate stranger, whispering, goading, mocking. As a belated gift, I slowly and painstakingly began to unearth my father's incomplete charitable work out in Bangladesh and then chose to resurrect it alone. And I turned this into Amkariza Foundation. Since 2012, I've been attempting to use my business know-how, network of contacts and new ideas to deliver his dreams of monumentally lifting rural and poverty-stricken folks out of their dire situation. Fast forward, here I am in 2016, utterly rooted with my feet, head and heart in London, yet also stretching my arms feverishly to reach the many I have sleepless nights over, those I care about out in Bangladesh, simple, hard-working families who are toiling day and night, everyday grassroots, mothers, fathers, artisans, orphans, street kids I have been meeting since 2012, who I am passionately inspired to try and help, whose honest, unedited stories and visions and dreams we, as developed nations in the Western Hemisphere, never hear from. Through these posts and my memoirs, I hope to bring the dilemmas and dreams of the rural village men and women desperate to climb out of poverty, of the rickshaw man who looks young but is an old man in his head, caring and feeding for his entire family alone, whom I promised to help but who is now lost to me as all I had was his mobile phone number, of the plans I have to empower the hundreds of hijab-clad girls at the school my father funded via skills, training and education, and of orphan children like the young bright lad I met a few years back who I continue to cry about because 2 years on, I cannot seem to find a solution to educate him as his nearest kin have no space for him in their house. I observe with calm anger the dreadful statistics of global poverty and how millennium goal after millennium goal continues to be set. Yet as the Bangladeshi folks wisely remark, let them have their goals, miss. We just need food, health, clean water and hope. And the only way we get this is to believe in Allah, as after all, who else is there for us poor people? Oh my, tara zesata khorok, tara zesata plen loya atok, amrar khali khani, shoril, fani, asha, রাখি আর আল্লাহ আমরা একটা দিবা কারণ আল্লাহ যদি দেন না আর খেয়ে আছে আমরা লাগে আমরা গরিব লাগে আর খেয়ে আছে আল্লাহ না থাকলে. For me, inequality simply exists because wealth generation is limited to the few and often women, especially those who become mothers, remain financially subjugated and controlled everywhere at the mercy of a patriarchal society, be it in the UK or Bangladesh. So in this series of posts and my memoir, I hope to share the experiences of my mission as a campaigner and activist to ensure the independent economic well-being of every woman and then of every man. How I plan to change the horrific statistic that keeps me awake at nights that only 1% of the world's property and deeds are owned by women. Before I go, a parting thought. Good sociology to me means being the change we want to see. But before we blame society, I remind myself we are society. And to make this a better place, we must change ourselves. I first had to do that. It's not easy. It comes with serious consequences and challenges. By sharing it all with you here in this memoir, I hope at the very least to spark debate, provide insight, and cultivate interest in this crazy, lovable, thrilling new world I now occupy, and to give those connected out in the world a chance to listen to a new voice and new ideas for a massive societal change through Lovedesh that one day could change the fortunes of almost 900 million people across the global south. So that was an article I wrote in LSE, and I'm sorry for crying because you got to realize I don't have anyone to talk to about my father since I'm disowned and I don't. But I want to say thank you for listening to me, and you know, I am going to wrap it up, but I'm going to leave on a positive because you know I don't like that, and I know that many of you haven't even looked at my TikTok fam who are with me, listening to me as I go live on chapter 3, My Father's Daughter. I am my father's daughter. I will restore his legacy. I will bring down those who have actively exploited, destroyed, stolen his assets and are now profiteering in Bangladesh, and I'm calling them out. Faisal Ahmed Choudhury, my cousin, who is a director of Barak Power in Sylhet, very well known, very rich, who my father sponsored, but yet trampled over my father's charity. His wife, Rushi, who is a head teacher of a kindergarten, who my father introduced. Yet today, both of them, I went crying to them over the years saying, my family have destroyed my father's charity, do something about it. Please help me, did nothing. Fahim Choudhury, my Faisal's brother. But of course, the biggest culprit of all, Enamul Haq Choudhury, who has seized control since last year and since COVID started, flew out to Bangladesh and has been living in my father's property. You tell me as his daughter how I would stomach the fact that this man is sleeping in my father's house. This man has actually stolen land belonging to my family. This man has also completely erased all of my father's name because he's really jealous, and he screamed and he's called obscenities about my father. But today, my sister remains wedded to him. My mother, my brother, my sisters, none of them have stood up to him, but he is shit scared of me. Do you know why I know, Enam, you're shit scared of me? Because when I last saw you in 2016, was it? I saw you in Barclays in Norbury High Street, and when you saw me, you jumped and hid inside Barclays Bank, you little lying toad. Why don't you come out and face me, Enamul Haq Choudhury? Because I want all of Sylhet, a video is going out to Sylheti people to actually name and shame you and understand that by destroying my charity in Lovedesh in 2015, you destroyed opportunities for Lovedesh to give jobs and to be one of the most incredible brands in the world today. And by decimating me and destroying me, it took me 3 years while I was made homeless. Today, I missed out on the opportunity to be at Kew Garden, to have the mail on Sunday to fly out. I had got so many opportunities. And here's the thing. Why is it that my family talk about me being a prostitute and a harlot, but don't mention to people that I won Entrepreneur of the Year at the National British Muslim Awards? Not one person from my family congratulated me, because here's what happens in my disgusting, Khobis Munafik Ali Nogor Choudhury family. The men control it all. The women are just Stepford wives and actually trauma bonded and Stockholm syndromed, including my disgusting, disgraceful sister Nazmin Choudhury, who uses her prowess, or so-called legal prowess, to try and arrest me, made me homeless, me and Amber. She's actually been writing letters to Amber's father, bitching about me. Enam, come out of hiding. The family summit is happening a week from Sunday. If somebody can really quickly look at the date, 14th is a Monday, 15th, 16th, 17th, 18th, 20th of February, I believe, is a Sunday, 11:36 a.m. 20th of February, I've already issued an invitation, Enam, Faisal, Fahim, Rushi. But mainly, do you know what's disgusting? You all know that in my late father's property in November 2019, while I'm crying and trying to get hold of my inheritance, Saleh Ahmed Khosrow, my cousin, my dad's sister's son, sexually assaulted me by forcing me, and he held me down while he stuck his tongue down my throat until I beat him off, and I couldn't scream because the servants were there and they were terrified. And then I missed my flight the next morning, and guess what? There are witnesses. Saleh Ahmed Khosrow, you need to go to jail because your daughter was getting married a few days later. You disgusting pervert. You are in your 60s. How dare you touch me? But that's what you do, isn't it? But here's the thing. I now have photographs. What are you going to do in my next memoirs when I reveal the photographs of my entire family? My entire family taking Saleh Ahmed Khosrow on a boat trip in November last year, including my sister and Enam. How are you going to hold your heads up when you realize that there is a video dated January 2021 where I'm asking for help from my family relatives, telling them that in the year 2019, Saleh Ahmed had assaulted me. None of you respond. All of you ghost me. But then suddenly, 11 months later, you're all seen on a boat ride with him, hugging, having dinner with him, even though you know I've accused him of sexual assault. I'm going to wrap it there. But my father, that was just the opening of the story tonight of the torture existence and how my father was mocked, belittled, and he died. And after his death, people have been mocking his legacy and saying, oh, look at Al-Hajj Abdul Muquith Choudhury's family. He thought he was so arrogant, but look at them now. They're all fighting. His daughters are crazy, and the son-in-law has taken control of his assets. He was a joke. Well, guess what? My father's not a joke, because by the time I've finished, everyone's going to love AMC, and everyone's going to respect and understand the passion that my father had to help the poorest. And that starts with resurrecting again Amkariza Foundation. AMC, Abdul Choudhury, Ariza. And also, I'm delighted to share that a script I've written, hopefully it will be turned into a drama series, multi-generational, called The Blues of Mahafakir, inspired by my father's story of having run away from his toxic brothers in 1950s Bangladesh, which would then be East Pakistan, was shortlisted in a major global script writing competition because it depicts the story of a man called Mahafakir who arrives into North London in the late 1950s and lives with a landlady and a few others and begins his ascent in the world of property by starting his job as a mechanic, very loosely based on my father, so that for the first time we can hear the narrative and tears of a brown man, because I'm sick and tired we don't talk enough about the brown, brilliant Babas, okay? And a reminder, 23rd of March, that's why I'm under pressure, is the anniversary of my father's death. He died in 2004. I still don't have my inheritance. My brother remains in control of a £1 million asset. I want Nasmin's. I want Nasmin, the restaurant, as damages reparation. I want all my father's assets returned to me. And on the 23rd of March, Bully Free Blue is an invitation to any of you who might have been moved by this story and say, Yasmin, what can we do? If you can, just wear blue, because blue is the color of skies. Blue is also the color of hope, okay? The Blues of Mahafakir. It reminds you that behind trauma and abuse, it's not just women, but there are many toxic men and women helping women to be toxic. And that in doing so, we can all be a bit more of a comfort to each other, because other than that, I don't know what else to do. Thank you for listening. And a reminder, if you want to find out more about my memoirs, or you want to help me, or you want to support me, visit lovedesh.com, where you can buy my beauty book or buy any product from Lovedesh to keep me going, to keep my father's story alive, and to get to creating and funding projects that will help the very poorest, whom I hope you will all meet. Take care, and I know I'm a bit over time, but 10 minutes, so it's not too bad. Chapter 4 is coming next, and what that will be, I will let you know. Thank you very much. Bye.